With the Greensboro chapter of The World Can't Wait, which is a national movement. And I want to talk a little bit about the importance of organizing on a local level. A good friend recently suggested to me that it's a lot easier to be a radical in DC than in Greensboro, and I couldn't agree more. Holding a sign and chanting while surrounded by 100,000 more people is pretty easy. And while being that dot in the masses is very important, a willingness to be the loner on the sidewalk of your hometown is just as essential. DC is symbolic for political action because, of course, it's the center of our federal government. And, of course, there's a definite need for those huge marches on the Capitol to happen, and to happen big. But the same people who tout the grassroots mantras about staying separate from bipartisan political agendas also tend to be the ones that wish to remain strictly in our nation's capital, away from the homes of most Americans, and people we could and very well should try to reach on a very intimate level. We would get nowhere in developing a grassroots people's movement if we continue to only confront the political figures in a city miles away. There are numerous people I know who are actually more likely to come to an event in their hometown because, after all, going to DC involves finding a ride, finding parking, and of course right now paying, over $3 a gallon for gas. So going to DC automatically means sacrificing a lot of time and money, and it's a sacrifice that can and very well should be made in our time. However, with the idea that change is only met through assembling in massive numbers on Capitol Hill, it perpetuates local minds, and those who do not have the means to get to DC are left feeling there's nothing they can do but wait for the next election, or wait for the masses in the nation's capital to make the change for them. The idea that local action accomplishes nothing is perhaps one of the most common battles I fight as an organizer with a local chapter in a relatively small city in North Carolina. We had over 500 people in Greensboro for our April 21st anti-war fair. It was a huge success, but we should have had more. I believe the fear of the gathering of Eagles counter-protesters that like to show up to these things, and also bad press leading up to the event, probably frightened a lot of people away. And I actually don't blame them. Something we need to get at. Because we live in a society where confrontation is to be avoided, where being associated with a crowd that's possibly anti-America or radical, and maybe even a little communist, is to be avoided. And people can let that go when they're in a crowd of tens of thousands. After all, what are the odds in DC that your mother, your boss, or your friend will see you on the news and, God forbid, find out you were at an anti-war protest or an impeachment rally? But when you're only one of 500, when the local stations have their cameras pointed at you, it becomes a lot harder. Especially if you accept the notion that local action doesn't amount to much. Why do you want to be singled out as one of the few locals that waste their time in such futile efforts? But what good is your presence in DC if you won't take it back to the streets of any town USA, to your homes, schools, and offices? We're all guilty of this. I'm guilty myself of it. We stand out on a street corner Mondays and Tuesdays with anti-war and impeachment messages, and sometimes there's only 4 of us. And sometimes you feel a little ridiculous, especially when you're getting the finger, or when people are saying, oh, there's only 4 of you, what good are you going to do? But we need to keep in mind that real change will only come when we leave our inhibitions behind and commit to a cause when and wherever our presence is needed. Thank you.
Time to start. Reverend, can you access that next day? There were 2 there. Thank you. Well, good evening.